I'd like to welcome you all here today to celebrate Charles Shepherd. My name is David Miller, the Bishop of the West Mountain First Ward, and I'll be conducting today. We'd like to recognize Sister Jill Davenport and Sister Marcia Davenport for helping us with the music today. We'd also like to acknowledge that James Shepherd gave the family prayer earlier. The pallbearers for Charles today. Are on the program his daughters, Charlene Dastrup, Laura Burlingame, Sherry Betcher, Ann Reitzel, Sarah Houts, and Amy Butler. Honorary pallbearers are Morris Shepherd, Jerry Shepherd, James Shepherd, Russell Dastrup, Larry Burlingame, Kenneth Betcher, Terry Reitzel, Dave Houts, and Justin Butler. We will open this meeting with singing on page 86, How Great Thou Art, and the opening prayer will be given by Leslie Shepherd.
Our dear, kind, and gracious Heavenly Father, we're so thankful for this day. We're thankful for all of our many blessings. We're thankful for the opportunity to meet as family and friends, to remember and to honor a great man, Charles Morris Shepherd. We're thankful for the great example that he has been to all of us, and for all the many things that he's taught by word and by example. We ask you to bless us as his friends and family, that we may be comforted to be able to remember him and honor him and do the things that will be pleasing unto him. We ask thee again to bless us with thy spirit, to help lead and guide us. We ask and pray for these things in the name of Jesus Christ. Amen.
Thank you. There's a few seats up here if you're looking for some people out in the wares. We'll proceed with the program as follows. The obituary will be read by Russell Dastrup. Then we'll have a live sketch and a tribute by Sandra Critchfield. Then Sister Shar Dastrup will give us a speech. And then we'll have the grandchildren give us a musical number. Grandpa, tell me about the good old days. And we'll go to that point in the program.
Hello, everyone. I'm honored to be here today and thankful to all of you for being here. For those of you that don't know me, I'm Russ Dastrup. I am the oldest of Charles Shepherd's children and children-in-law. I am married to Charlene, the prettiest of the 6 daughters of Charles and Ellen Shepherd. Charles Morris Shepherd, 82, of Payson, Utah, passed away at his home from lung disease on September 15, 2023. Charles was surrounded by friends and family. Charles was born on May 16, 1941 in Provo, Utah, to parents Arthur Lewis Shepherd and Vera Hone. Charles attended West High School in Salt Lake City, Utah, where he met the love of his life, Ellen Webb. Charles and Ellen were married on December 26, 1958 in Heber, Utah, and were later sealed on November 16, 1966 at the Salt Lake Temple. They would go on to have 9 children together. After high school, Charles enlisted in the military, where he served in the 82nd Airborne. After discharge from the U.S. Army, Charles worked at State Brass Foundry and Star Brass Foundry before moving his family to Idaho to run a dairy farm. In 1976, Charles and family returned to Utah, where he worked at Star Brass until 1985. In 1986, Charles opened a foundry of his own called Eagle Foundry of Utah with his brothers Earl and Ray, where he worked until he retired in 2005. Many of his children still operate the foundry today. Ellen passed from dementia on April 11, 2015, and Charles found love again later that year in Myra Christie, who would become his second wife on December 18, 2015. Charles enjoyed spending time in the great outdoors. His hobbies included camping, hunting, fishing, fly tying, horseback riding, archery, painting, and sculpting artwork. Charles also took great joy from spending time with his family. Every summer, Charles grew an expansive garden, the products of which he generously shared with his family, friends, and neighbors. Charles was a storyteller, speaking of the trials and tribulations he faced throughout his life and reminiscing about his youthful adventures. Charles was a member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, and he served a service mission at the Bishop's Storehouse in Springville, Utah with Myra between 2019 and 2021. Charles will be deeply missed by all, and his legacy will live on through each of us. Charles was preceded in death by his parents Arthur Lewis Shepherd and Vera Hone Shepherd, his wife of 56 years, Ellen Webb Shepherd, his brothers Glenn Hone Shepherd, Arthur Ray Shepherd, and Wayne D. Shepherd, and his sister Bonnie Shepherd Jefferson. Charles is survived by his wife of almost 8 years, Myra Christie Shepherd, his children with his wife, Ellen, Morris, and Bryn Shepard, Jerry and Kelsey Shepard, James and Leslie Shepard, Charlene and Russell Dastrup, Laura and Larry Burlingame, Sherry and Kenny Betcher, Ann and Terry Wrightsell, Sarah and Dave Houts, Amy and Justin Butler, his 47 grandchildren, 52 great-grandchildren, and 1 great-great-grandchild. Charles is also survived by his siblings, Sandra and Ron Critchfield, Gary and Barbara Shepard, and Earl and Jeanette Shepard. Charles also received the blessings of a step-family from his marriage to Myra. He is survived by Myra's children, Patty and Greg Howard, Lee Maynard, Billy and Candace Maynard, and Robbie Maynard. Myra's 17 grandchildren and Myra's 14 great-grandchildren. A viewing will take place on Thursday, which was last night, September 21, 2023, at the Nelson Family Mortuary, and the funeral service is taking place today. The burial will follow the funeral service, where Charles will be laid to rest next to his deceased wife Ellen at Evergreen Cemetery in Springfield, Utah.
How do you ever speak of someone that was so great in the things that he did? I was reading in my father's biography about Charles, and this is what my dad said about Charles. He said he was a very active and he wrote in about saying he was very active and enjoyed what the other boys did, but could not keep up with them because they were much older than he was. He was of a quiet disposition. Now, I don't know if all of you think of him as being a quiet person, but my dad said he had a quiet disposition and would play by himself. When Charles was put in school, they changed the style of reading, and many kids at that time had trouble with trying to learn to read. At age 11, Charles got polio. It was on, as I remember, it was Halloween night, and Charles was laying on the couch. And we were all concerned that he wasn't going to get any candy for Halloween, but we all promised that we'd bring him some home. The next day, he ended up in the Salt Lake City Hospital, where he spent months fighting polio. When he came home, he had some paralysis on his, I believe, right side, but working hard to overcome that. The only thing that Charles had that I know of was that he had trouble swallowing and had to turn his head to swallow from that polio. On the farm, there were many fun times, but there were also a few bad times, like when my brothers would get in Claude's buckets. Now, if you don't know what a clod is, it's a piece of dirt that's gotten very hard, almost like a rock, and they would throw it at each other. One time, one of the boys threw what we thought was a clod, but it was a rock, and broke Charles's arm. In his teenage years, Charles was having trouble in school. He started sloughing quite a bit. He and a friend of his, I think, can't remember the friend's name, but they hopped a train to California. Literally hopped a train. They did not have a ticket. They went to California. Upon arrival, they were met with police, and they were sent back via California. When he came home, my mom and dad tried to figure out what would help him most, and they decided with Charles that they would send him to Salt Lake City to live with his grandma Shepherd, and there he would go to West High School. He was all for that, right? But at West High School, he met a beautiful, little blonde girl named Ellen Webb. She was very cute and had his heart immediately. to Orem, and there he proposed to Ellen, and they were married. And they both went out to Fort Bragg, North Carolina, to serve, he said, time, literally time, out there. Then he came back to Utah. Russ has told you the accomplishments and the things that he did. Charles could be quite funny. I remember Charles and Ellen lived next door to us, and I had this cute little fountain in the front yard, and every time Charles would go fishing, I'd say, "Oh, bring me back a fish." Well, one day, going out to this little fountain, which only held maybe 3 gallons at the most of water, there was a big fish flipping around in that little fountain, courtesy of Charles. I know one time Charles had a great harvest of squash, which most of the time he had a great harvest of everything, but he had a great harvest of squash, so he put all the squash in his truck, nearly filling the whole truck. And he started down the road. He seen some ladies pushing their babies in a stroller. He pulled over and asked them if they would like some squash. Upon which the ladies said, "Well, how much are they?" And he said, "If I have to pay you, you can't have them." So needless to say, they loaded up their strollers. In fact, he said you couldn't see the babies, only squash. And as he drove away, they were pushing their squash on babies. Or squash babies, yeah. I don't know if many of you knew that Charles saved 2 people from the river one spring, from the Provo River. He felt inspired to pull over, and he could see these 2 in the water and ran out and jumped in the water and saved both their lives. I think his only regret was that he didn't save one other of them, and they drowned. Charles went a lot on inspiration. Charles loved fishing and hunting and camping, especially with his family. Football, BYU, of course. After 7 years of battling Alzheimer with Ellen, Hunter and Charles said their goodbye to his dear wife, Ellen. Charles lost the glitter or gleam of his eye. He was sad all the time. I felt, and so did my brothers, feel so sorry for him. Charles's daughters introduced Myra Christie to Charles. He fell in love with her at first sight. At least that's what he told me. He loved her, and he loved her with all his heart. That sparkle in his eye was back. Myra, thank you for giving that to Charles and spending the next 8 years with him. I seen him do things I never thought I'd see Charles do, like teaching Sunday school, or no, it's primary, teaching primary. Painting rocks, which really got me, because I didn't think he was that desperate. Because I seen him paint pictures, he did a good job. He was a farmer, an artist, a fisherman, and certainly a cowboy. He was a missionary. I was glad when Myra and Charles took their mission papers out and came to the storehouse in Springville where Ron and I were serving. We had great experiences. I loved watching Charles he didn't like working with the people who would come in because he said he couldn't hear them. So he spent his time mainly in the back, loading and unloading and putting stuff in the fridge and greeting patrons. I'm sure there's a great reunion in heaven with Charles and Ellen and his brothers and his sister and his mom and dad. I know I will miss him, as I'm sure many of you will miss, or all of you will miss him. You knew he was husband, father, uncle, brother, and many more things. We love you, Charles, and we will miss you. We love you, Myra, and hope that this day will bring you peace. And we say this name in Jesus Christ. Amen.
Okay, you guys are all late because my dad would have been here 2 hours before. When he, if something started at 9, he would have been here at 6. That's how my dad was. He was overly prompt. So, I'm going to just tell you some memories about my dad. I asked some people to send me some. My memory, my dad was so afraid that he was going to be late, this is no good. So me and the girls, when we were younger, my dad was always afraid that when we went camping, that he would not get his spot either at Strawberry or Soldier Creek. And so he would take the trailer up with us girls at probably Wednesday, and we'd be up there by ourselves, and we'd be there to hold his spot. But we made it an adventure, made fires, washed our clothes out on the fire. I would never do that with my kids, no. So I don't think anybody would do that, but that was an adventure for us. You don't want to go out fishing with my dad, because if he was trolling, and even if he wasn't catching anything, or if he felt like he had a bite, he said, just one more time, and he would say it over and over and over again, and you would never get back. You'd never get back. And then Kaylee, memory from Kaylee. My memory of Kaylee's that stands out to me, Grandpa always telling me that I stole his hair. Plus, he would not allow me to cut it. Russ's memory was Charles would always grab his chest hair and pull it out. Because I guess, if he had more hair than him, he was gonna rip it out. Plus, everybody remembers that when my dad would grab his hand, he would squeeze it till it pretty much crushed. He always had to have that grip, Leslie's memories was taking trips to Wendover and with my dad and mom, and they enjoyed playing slots and seafood. I think my dad had a something magnetic, because he always won, which was really weird. Terry's memory was always a 44-ounce Pepsi with this much ice in it through every drive-through. Laura's memory was, I remember one of the last trips to Starvation, he was in such a hurry to leave so early in the morning, probably 4 a.m., that he drug all the jacks with him underneath the trailer. He was the only person, also, she said, he's the only person I know that could leave the house in the morning and drive 10,000 miles and be back by dinner. That was my dad. Sarah remembers how he was always so excited to get camping and so hurry to go home. Couldn't wait to get there, but such a hurry to go home. Other memories that I had about my dad was when we lived in Idaho, there was this little teeny, kind of like a gas station store, and the guy in there was Baptist, and my dad would always go in there, and he was so gonna preach the Book of Mormon, and they would have these little get-togethers of, religious going back and forth, and, he always loved the gospel, and I think he wanted to share it with others. And I was glad that he got to serve a mission, because that was one of his things that he really wanted to do. I always liked the fact that my dad would always make us all eat all of our food, and he would make us eat meat. James hated meat, and I wouldn't eat his meat for him off his plate, so he didn't have to eat it. But he was the most giving person, and if we could go over to pick up the vegetables, he would drive around and honk the horn and say, "Come on out." And he would just go around and delivering all the vegetables to everybody. I really think my dad learned a lot after marrying Myra. He became a little bit more softer and more tender. And there was an occasion that there were some things that happened. And it was 2 or 3 days after that standing at the door. And he, which he had never done in his life, he asked me for forgiveness and to forgive him. That was something that was so tender to me, because he had never done that before. And I really think it's because he learned a lot in those last 8 years after he was married to Myra. And he just grew so spiritually and so amazing. One thing about my dad, he taught me to work hard. And it didn't matter if you're a boy or a girl, you work hard. He was my hero. I never wanted to disappoint him. I just always wanted to make sure I was a good kid. Because I just looked up to him so much. And all of us, he taught us girls that if he was digging a hole, we were down in the hole digging with him. If we were re-shingling the roof, we were all up there re-shingling the roof. He taught us how to work. And I'm so thankful for that. Another thing I wanted to, and Sandra talked about how he was really in tune to stuff, and he liked stories. And then there was I want to kind of read this experience that he had. It was probably about 16 years ago, and which is very odd to me because my dad never ever showed up at my house ever. But it was a Saturday morning, and I'll just read his, because I actually have this talk that he actually spoke at church too. That was one thing that he did that he had never done before. I'm just going to read his experience. I would like to tell you about an experience that I had about 14 years ago. I wanted to go horseback riding. I loaded my horses here in Payson and headed out to Wallsburg. I went all the way to Wallsburg, and my brother-in-law Gordon was not home. So I headed back the canyon. As I was driving down, I had an impression that to go to and ride Tim. But I had not ridden up there since my horse fell off the cliff on Father's Day 38 years ago. But the impression kept coming all the way down the canyon. As I got to the opening of the mouth of the canyon, an impression came that was so strange. I called my daughter that lived in Linden and asked her to go riding with me. But she was busy. She jokingly said that her husband Russ would love to go riding. So even though he had never really ridden a horse before, somehow he was talked into going. So we drove up to the parking lot area close to my home in Linden. Got the horses saddled and ready. After riding for some time, I could see at the top of Baldy some movement. I decided to go up and see what was up there. As I got closer in the distance, I could see a young mother with her 2 young boys. She appeared to be having trouble walking. As we rode closer, I got off my horse and she fell into my arms. She was crying and she was saying that she had been praying that somebody would come and help her. She had gotten hurt and had been struggling to get down the hill with her 2 sons. I loaded her on the horse and brought her down the mountain safely. I truly believe that it was not by chance. I believe that it was her prayer and her faith that had led me to her. I am thankful that Heavenly Father inspired me to go that day. I learned that day that God does hear our prayers and sends help from others that listen to the Spirit. I am glad He trusted me and gave me that experience. So that was my dad's experience. So he was a person that listened and stuff. I just want to say that I am so grateful for his example, for his love. I'm going to miss him. I'm really going to miss him. But his legacy goes on. I'm grateful for the plan of salvation and for the fact that we can be together as families forever. I'm grateful that he's up there and he can breathe. That was so hard to not be able to see him breathe. Now he can breathe. He's with his brothers, his sisters, his parents, and my mom, and all those other people that have gone before, and they are looking out for us. And that's what makes it nice to know that we have them as our guardian angels now to help us, as they can help us as we need help. We can pray and we can feel their love around us. I'm thankful for the opportunity that I got to speak. And I say these things humbly in the name of Jesus Christ. Amen. Wait, one more thing I do have to read, sorry. This is very important. So, if you can see. When my father started the Foundry, he rented it from a guy named Ben Shippen. And his family, when they came last night, gave us this note. And this is from their family. Ben he's passed away, but for decades now, there have been There have been business ties between the Shippens and the Shepherds. Those ties continue, but they began with Charles and our late father, Ben Shippen. As personalities, they were cut from the same cloth. Industrious, self-reliant, occasionally hard-nosed, that's definitely for sure, more than occasionally, he says. There was no traits Ben felt or respected more than the ability and habit to work hard. And the dirtier you look doing it, the more admirable it was. And that was my dad. On these grounds, Charles and his kids who worked with him won him over easily. We often heard Ben say admiringly that he knew of no one who worked as hard as the Shepherds. But Charles and Ben shared more than work ethics. They shared old school grit and determination and faith. Theirs was a generation that still preferred to worship God, not individually. And while Charles was one of a kind, as Ben was, they were both willing to sacrifice their individuality for the good of the country, community, and faith when each other was required. We intended, they said we were so thankful for him and that we love him, but I thought that was really a nice note that they sent, so I figured I would like to read it. Thank you so much. Can we please have all the grandchildren and great-grandchildren come up?
that, Dave. Whew. The rest of the program will go as follows. Dave Holtz will speak to us, and then we'll have a musical number by Sister Tara Wall, In the Garden. And then we'll have Patty Howard speak to us, Myra's daughter. I'll give a few closing remarks. And then we will close by singing on 152, God Be With Us Till We Meet Again. And our closing prayer will be by Kenneth Betcher. And after the prayer, if the pallbearers would please come forward.
That's not very fair, I'll tell you. I have to follow that song. Before I forget, I want to thank everybody that came today for the support you've given this family and Charles especially. He loved all of you. I hope you know that. It's an honor for me to speak today. I'm so sorry. I'm a tender flower, and this might happen a lot today. I have so many memories with Charles. When my wife asked me to speak, she asked me if I wanted to speak. I told her no. She said, well, then you don't have to. I said I didn't say I wouldn't do it, but I didn't want to. It's my honor to speak today. I wrote down tons of different memories I have. I have like 10 or 20 pages of these memories, so I had to cut it down a little bit. But most of my memories, my fond memories, are on horses with Charles. I call him Grandpa, so I'm going to go back and forth from Grandpa and Charles. But I had so many great memories with Grandpa on horses. He was one of our best riding buddies. Kenny and I rode horses once a week with him for years, and we had a lot of fun, a lot of memories on horses. One of my first things I figured out about Charles is he didn't like sticking to a trail. He never liked to just get on a trail up in the mountains. He liked to make his own trail. And we went so many places where no man has gone before, which was a lot of fun for us. And he knew every trail, he knew every mountain, he knew every road. You couldn't get that guy lost. He had a sense of where he was at all the time. And it didn't matter where we were at in the state, he knew where he was. And that was always fun. Kenny and I sometimes would get turned around a little bit. We'd argue with him where the truck was. He said, no, it's not, it's down here. I said, no, it's not, it's over there. He said, just follow me, and it ended up being where the truck was at. So anyway, he liked to, I think, do that on purpose to me and Kenny. All those times we rode horses, very few times, we started those rides with a prayer. I don't remember him ever saying the prayer. Do you, Kenny? They usually switch back and forth between Kenny and I. And we just knew it was our turn. But that was a great example that we learned from him, that was something we should do. And Kenny and I still ride a lot, and we still do that every time we ride. I can't read half this stuff, I'm sorry. Okay, some of our memories were hunting with Charles, a lot of them. And a lot of those times we were on horses. And it always amazed me that Kenny and I would show up, because we thought, you never know, we might be staying overnight. All the things we might need, we've got in our saddlebags or an extra horse behind us, just in case. Grandpa would show up with three things: a Levi jacket, 3 or 4 bullets, I'd always have nice hiking boots and tons of bullets and everything we might possibly need for bad weather or whatever. But Grandpa was so tough. He just didn't need that stuff. And I remember a lot of times us offering him food or drink or water, he'd say, I'm fine. Morris reminded me of that because he always says that too. Whenever I ask or offer Morris something, he says, I'm fine. But it amazed me how tough a guy he was. He could hike. He had so much energy. He was such a hard worker when it came to hunting and stuff. And he would just leave us in the dirt a lot of the time. I remember a story. Well, I remember an event that happened to me with Charles. We were up on the mountain we were hunting. We were going up 2 different ridges. He decided to go on one side, and I decided to go on the other side so we could see the deer on both sides. And eventually I saw some deer, so I heard got off my horse, I tied him up, and Grandpa was on the other side. And I was trying to scope these deer out, and I realized that my horse had broke loose and decided that he wanted to be with Grandpa's horse. So he left me. He went down the mountain back to the other side. And I couldn't believe it. I was going to have Charles bring that horse back to me. And I started waving at Charles like, come on, man, come get me. Because it was a pretty good hike. And he just waved at me. For about 20 minutes, he just waved at me. I think, I know he can see me. But so finally, I hiked down that mountain back to the other side. And he thought that was a lot of fun. He really laughed at that. So he just waited for me. I just had a feeling he wanted me to tell you he was a good shot. I don't have that written down, but I just think he told me to tell you guys that. And he was. He never missed, honestly, with a bow or with a rifle. Oh, another thing, when he shot an animal, usually I think in most families it's tradition to clean your own animal and prepare it and harvest it. He would look at me and Kenny and say, you're doing it. And we obviously knew there was just no choice in that. We were going to take care of that. Charles was going to watch us do it. And that was always my honor. We would have done that anyway for him. He's been an amazing example to me and our whole family. He was so much a riding partner for me, and I really am going to miss that. One of the last rides we went on, just over a year ago, and he was on oxygen, and couldn't do the things he wanted to do, but he wanted to go for a horse ride. So we packed up a whole bunch of those green oxygen bottles, tied them to his horse, and filled saddlebags full of oxygen, and we went off on a ride. It brought me a lot of joy to see that. He was healthier than I'd seen him in a long time on that horse, and he had a great time. That's a great memory for me to look in front of me and see a horse covered in oxygen bottles. He loved the mountains. He loved the creations of our Heavenly Father. He had a talent for seeing beauty. One of the things he always did, whether we were in a truck or wherever we might be camping or on a horse, he would always say, look at that cloud, look at that cloud, look at that cloud. He'd say, can you see the elephant in that cloud? Look at those horses running in that cloud. Look, there's a fish over there in that cloud. He could see things that most people couldn't. But honestly, once he pointed them out to me, I saw them too. I'll miss that. He loved BYU sports, obviously, you guys all know that. He spent many hours watching ball games. Didn't always have to be BYU, but Myra and Grandpa loved that together. They did that a lot. And it brought them a lot of joy spending time with each other and doing that together. He was a huge fan of BYU. He had a power too. I don't know if you guys know it or not. I think somebody mentioned it, maybe Charlie mentioned it, I can't remember, but he had a power where he could rub his hands like that so fast you thought fire was going to come from him. But he got so excited, and when the game was tense and it came down to the last minute, or we needed a good play or something like that, I'd love to sit there next to him and video him. I videoed it a lot, honestly, and I've got it on my phone. But he would do that, he would rub his hands together. I think it was that he was just so nervous. But I think possibly he might have created luck with that, because a lot of the time when he did that, we were able to make a better player pull the win off. It's funny because the other day we were able to spend some time with Grandpa, and Sarah was able to spend the night and the next morning with him the other day, and which we are so grateful for that blessing. But when Grandpa passed, a couple days after that, or a day after, Sarah couldn't stop crying because Grandpa was going to miss the Arkansas game. That was her big worry for him because he looked so forward to that game. And I kept telling her that he had better seats than any of us, and he was there. And I'm pretty sure, because we won that game, we weren't supposed to, that I'm positive that he was rubbing his hands hard and fast. Little BYU players. You know, one of the things I'll miss, the other night I was watching that game, and I picked up my phone to call him, and he'd already passed the day before. And it hit me, that was the first time it really hit me that Charles was gone, this was real. Because I enjoyed that. We always called each other back and forth. I would hear Myra screaming in the background, yelling and screaming at that TV, and I could hear that. That brought me a lot of joy. But we would talk about the plays, and he would share his anxiety or his excitement. And I loved doing that during the games. We'd call each other a couple of times and say, "Did you see that play?" And we'd talk back and forth, and that was something that I enjoyed with Charles. I've got a couple stories that I want to share with you about Ellen and Myra. And these stories kind of prove the love that he had for both of them. And we enjoyed seeing that. He was a great example, and he loved, and he was committed to both of them. I'll first talk about Ellen a little bit. Charles was, they were inseparable. Ellen and Charles went everywhere together. They enjoyed life, they enjoyed going for rides, they enjoyed fishing, hunting, camping, just sitting there. And they spent a lot of time together. And we obviously went camping and things like that sometimes without Ellen. And he was, like I think Charlene mentioned again too, that he was always in a hurry to get there. He was the first one to get there, normally 2 hours before anybody else. But we'd wake up in the morning, we'd get up pretty early, and we'd wake up and see Grandpa's trailer gone, his truck gone, everything was gone. So he ghosted us in the middle of the night, or early in the morning before he just got up to get out. And he always blamed it on the garden, watering turned, something happened at the house, or somebody needed him. He had a million reasons why, but we knew what the reason was, and it was because he wanted to go check on his wife, Ellen. He loved her very much. And sometimes he just missed her. was sad, and we were all brokenhearted for him. He wasn't even the same guy. He didn't have the energy, he didn't have that light behind him. He just moped around and was brokenhearted. We all tried to do our best to keep him alive, basically. We wondered if he was even going to live through it. But he missed her so much. And this is what leads into Myra. Thank goodness for Myra. Honestly, Myra saved Grandpa's life, and he saved our lives too. Or she saved our lives too. All of a sudden, he was so happy, and he had so much to look forward to. He was so excited. I can't remember how long it was that they dated. But they were married pretty quick. I mean, it seemed like it was weeks to me, but it might have been longer than that. I don't know. But Grandpa knew the first time that he was able to spend time with her. That's all he wanted to do anymore. And he loved her very much, and he wasn't shy about telling us. He was very proud of her and loved her very much, and her family. That leads into a little proof I've got of that. We were on a buffalo hunt with Grandpa down in the Henry Mountains. Billy was with us, Kenny was with us, and we could have this remote area, and we didn't have cell service. We'd spend early morning, we'd be there before light, and then we'd come home at dark after we couldn't look for buffalo anymore. And on our way out of that area, you would eventually catch some cell service. And it was so funny because I got used to Grandpa doing that. He wasn't even talking about the hunt, he wasn't talking about buffalo, he wasn't talking about anything. He was staring at his phone waiting for that light. And he wanted to call Myra the second he got cell service. And that was kind of funny to me, and Kenny especially. It was just fun to see that, and we laughed about it. But one day, we were coming back and I was ready for him. So I put Grandpa's cell phone in my phone, and I was sitting right here. We're in my Bronco, so there's a little bit of a space between us, and then Grandpa was sitting right here. So as soon as we had service, I pushed send, or whatever you push on the phone, I guess, and it called Grandpa. And he was just waiting for the second he could call my name. And that phone rings. And he was so excited, it was like a little boy at Christmas time. He grabbed his phone, and he started answering, he's pushing the button, trying to answer it. I said, "Hi, Grandpa." He started talking to me on the phone, telling me how much he was upset about that, and I should never do that. He was chewing me out, and I was a foot away from him. And he really didn't. Honestly, he said a bad word, and I never heard Grandpa say that. And that's honestly the most mad I've ever seen. So that's proof right there, Mike, how much he loved you. A couple nights before Grandpa passed away, I told you Sarah and I happened to be over there and we were hanging out. And Gunsmoke was on the TV. Grandpa and I both love westerns. They enjoyed that together. Honestly, about 9 times out of 10 when you go there, there was a western on the TV. And they both loved that. I love that. We were just sitting there watching that, kind of talking a little bit here and there, not a lot, just kind of watching the show. And all of a sudden, Grandpa looks over at me out of the blue, and he said, "You know what's important, right?" And I didn't know for sure if I heard him correctly. So I said, "What, Grandpa?" And he said, "You know what's important, right?" And I wish I knew the answer so bad. I looked at him like, gosh, I wish I knew that answer. Because there's a lot of things that are important. And he told me, he said, the most important thing is family. He said, "Did you hear me?" And I go, "I'm not sure what you're saying, Grandpa. I heard him, but I didn't know what he was getting at." He said, "The most important thing is family." He said it again. I said, "I know that." while he was doing that, I was going to tell you something else he did, and I don't know if you guys remember this or not. But towards the end, Grandpa started getting a little more tender, and time with his family meant more, the gospel meant more to him. The gospel's always meant a lot to him, but he was more emotional. And every time he was going to be emotional, he would grab his lip like this. And I don't know what happened, but it caused tears to come out of his eyes every time he touched his lip right here. And he did have tears in his eyes that day when he told me that family was most important. I'll never forget it. I have a feeling that he told me that because he knew I'd be up here talking to you guys. And I have a feeling that he wants me to tell you that. And he also wants me to tell you that if you've got an issue or a problem or something that's getting in the way of your family, he wants you to fix it. And he's not going to be tender about that. He wants you to get it done. I probably won't go on anymore about that, but you know what's right. Family is the most important thing. As a parent, I'm going to say what I think you want me to say too, that we all want our kids to be happier, healthier, and better than we are. And I know that was Grandpa's worry. He always wanted to leave a good example so his kids would follow in that and be even better than him, which will be real hard. But he was 82 years old, and he earned a lot of wisdom in those 82 years. He absolutely earned it. He was the hardest working man I've ever met. He would work before the light was up, and he worked till it went down. And his one thing was family. That was what he wanted everybody to know. Out of everything he learned in this world, that family was most important. And we are lucky because we have an amazing family. And we are tough, and we're close. We do a lot of things together. We enjoy each other's company. But that was important to him. The gospel goes right along with that, right? Family's important. And the gospel of Jesus Christ is something that can bless us, that will create an atmosphere that will help our families be together forever. And he had a huge testimony of this true church. He was quiet in some ways, like Shar said, or like Sandra said. He did have a quiet side, and that normally surrounded his testimony of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. But his testimony was huge, and it was like a rock. You could feel it just being around him. And I'm so grateful for that. He was very important to me. I love him so much. I'm sure we will meet him again. Families are forever. And I'm grateful for this opportunity to speak about this great man. And I say these things in Jesus Christ.
Oh, sorry.
I'm so grateful for the opportunity I've been given to be part of this beautiful day, and as I get set, I've got some nerves that jump up, so excuse me for that, but I wanted to take a minute and just tell you how blessed I am to be part of your family. I'm a backyard neighbor, my husband and I, and we've had the privilege of living right behind the Shepherds for about 24 years. And they are a big, beautiful, and amazing family, all of them. And I never had a sister growing up until I was 18. My parents adopted a little girl. She was 2 weeks old, and relationship and friendship with her. And it's been just awesome to be kind of like a bird sitting up in a tree watching this beautiful family and grow close to you. And I'm just really grateful for this opportunity. As many of you know, Charles had a big, beautiful garden, and he loved sharing that garden with everyone. And I think that was the hard part, is seeing how much he would grow. He would grow nearly 5 acres, not really, but a good 3 was in the garden. And it felt like he would kill himself just grazing this garden and getting this garden away. And I know that was one of the hardest parts for him to let go, was this garden, the giving of the garden. He still wanted to get out there and plow and raise the fruit and vegetables and all of that and give it away, but he just felt like his hands were tied.
That was fabulous, and I'm really glad that we didn't miss that. I'm just sitting here going, enough already. I can hear Charles saying, get this over with. Let's go on. And so I don't want to be long, but I have a few things that I would love to share with you. I have really loved having my vision of Charles Shepherd brought. I have known him for a short time compared to all of you, and it's been delightful to hear his life. I mean, he told me a lot of stories, but it's so nice to see it and hear it in the consequence that happened. And so I want to thank you. I don't know many of you. I know some of you because you've been with my mom 3 times now. This is kind of a thing. Unfortunately, Mom, sorry, it's a thing. But because of that thing, we've had 3 really great men part of my life. So I thank you because it's a Friday morning and who wants to be here really? So thank you for being here to share your love with this family and with my mom. So in November, it will be 8 years that Charles and Myra began dating. Mom had to go to the Foundry and pick something up for Billy, and the girls took a photo of Mom, and a date was set up. And 3 days after that date, my mom calls me and says, my friend wants to talk to you. Okay, hello? I want to marry your mom. You're moving a little fast, aren't you? When you're my age, you gotta go fast. That was the end of that. On the phone, I called Billy right away. What's the deal with this guy? He's legit. That's all he said, he's legit. And when you think about how scary that really could have been, I'm so grateful that Charles was legit. Mom and Charles went to New Zealand 4 times, and Charles earned a name, and endearment by all of Mom's family. I should have thrown this in the casket. This is a powa shell. You know it as abalone, but it's a powa. Powa is, in New Zealand they have an interesting variety. It's called the Blackfoot variety, and it clings to things under the ocean, and it clings to things, and it's filled with like a black tar, and they eat it. I don't eat that. I don't think Charles did. Did you try it? He didn't try it. You go in the ocean and you get a knife and you pry it off the rock. I mean, you pull it off. This was Charles to my mom. And all of her family in New Zealand knew it. So hence, Charles was the powa. He was the powa. That's our Charles. I was 15, and my youngest brother Robbie was 8 when our dad passed away. Mom was 36, my dad was 40. You lucky devils, you had him twice as long as we had our dad. You are so fortunate. We've learned a thing or two about grief, and as many of you, I'm sure you've learned some of these same things, that grief is just that place where love doesn't know where to go. Our grief doesn't ever diminish, but our ability to deal with it increases. We can't go around it. We just have to go right through it. So it's going to be hard for a while. At the time of my grieving, my dad, and I mind you, I was the only girl, and I was a daddy's girl. In fact, when my mom ran out of the house to tell me that my dad had passed away, I looked at her with fear because I didn't know who she was. I knew my dad. But oddly enough, this thing happened that I wasn't afraid of death anymore, because if I died tomorrow, I was going to be with my dad, and you might feel the same way. It no longer has that sting, and it no longer has that fear, because you know that needed to learn quickly that either families are eternal or we're wasting a lot of our hope and our faith. So I have spent a lifetime through study and through prayer and through actions to know of that truth. And I have learned of that truth, and I will tell you I will not stray from that truth, because it is the greatest source of hope that I have. Mom, of course, cried often. She wanted to return to New Zealand to be with her family, but she knew that her 4 children were too American-based. We couldn't do it. Mom found a way to take us to the temple, not to the temple, we went to the cemetery often to find comfort, just to hang out and play and jump. And, you know, cemetery 40 years ago wasn't as crowded as it is now. So that's kind of where we hung out. We'd pick up McDonald's. But for Mom to find peace, she would attend the temple. And one night, she went to the temple, she came home, and she woke me up and couldn't wait to tell me her experience. She was in the chapel. They were waiting for the session to begin, and a large amount of people were gathering in. And she could feel the temple president's eyes watching her. And so she went and she hid behind the pillar. And the temple president stood and said, "The woman behind the pillar, I would love for you to come to the front and tell us why. Why did you come to the temple?" And my mom said that she had recently lost her husband. He had passed away. And she comes here to find peace, to try to find comfort and solace. The temple president proceeded then to share a beautiful sermon from Alma 40. I want to share with you just a couple of scriptures that he shared that night for her. Alma 40, verse 11 and 12. "Now concerning the state of the soul between death and resurrection, behold, it has been made known unto me by an angel, that the spirits of all men, as soon as they are departed from this mortal body, yea, the spirits of all men, whether they be good or evil, are taken home to that God who gave them life. And then shall it come to pass that the spirits of those who are righteous are received into a state of happiness, which is called paradise, and a state of rest, a state of peace, where they shall find rest from their troubles and from all care and sorrow." Does that sound like hope? A hope that we want? Last week's lesson in our home studies of Come Follow Me in 2 Corinthians 4, Paul is teaching about things seen and unseen. The premortal life was a test of our logic. We passed. Made sense? We're here. We're going to give it a try. It was clear and we agreed, but this mortal life is a test of our faith. And faith by its nature is something that we cannot see. We are obsessed with what we can see, and we're constantly looking for the evidence, when the evidence should be written in our hearts. I have been fortunate to spend time with Mom and Charles in their home. I've blessed food with them at their counter, and I've knelt in prayer beside their bed. I've always been touched by the humility in their pleas to bless their children, their grandchildren, and their great-grandchildren. They pray in faith for all their brothers and their sisters and their families. They pray for President Nelson, Elder Oaks, and Elder Eyring, and they ask the blessing upon the poor, the sick, and those in need. Charles has been a part of our lives for 8 years, our family's life. 8 years. You realize that's only 1/10 of his life. We had him for 1/10. And because of those 8 years, they were in their retirement years without worries of the day-to-day work grind and income and kids with races or baseball practices or driving lessons. They focused on one another. They were concerned with new teeth, doctor's appointments, medicine schedules, weddings and baby showers, and moving water lines, picking produce, and as of late, that darn oxygen tank. Their 24/7 constant togetherness was very concentrated, or you could say it was intense. They were two elderly single people who were praying to be guided to know what to do in their lives. They were born in two far places from one another and were very similar in their upbringing. They had meager resources. When they were young, they have a love of family, they have a strong work ethic, and they are generous and kind, and they helped each other keep the commandments and the covenants that they had made with God and previous spouses. They have been a great blessing to each other and even to us, family and friends. So now going forward, we'll miss Charles deeply. I shared a talk with him a little while ago from Elder Bednar, and he told me, "Oh, I know that talk." I love that talk. You may know this talk, and if you don't have it, we'll get you a link because it's a good talk. And Charles really, really loved it. In fact, when I was here just this past July, I watched him on the couch watch this talk more than once. In this message, Elder Bednar asked, "How do you know if the Spirit is guiding your thoughts and your actions?" And his reply, and I'm sure this would be his advice to all of you, Charles would say, "It's important for you to be a good boy and be a good girl. And if you're doing good, that is the Spirit teaching you. And the Spirit is what invites you and entices you to do good. So do good. Be a good boy and be a good girl." I know that would be his message. I will close with a recent quote I read from President or Prophet Joseph Smith. "The fundamental principles of our religion are the testimony of the apostles and prophets concerning Jesus Christ, that he died, he was buried, and he rose again on the third day. And all other things pertain to our religion are only appendages to that truth." That is the truth. That is the plan. That special gift from our Heavenly Father and his Son, Jesus Christ, that we will die, but we can rise again and be together with families. I know that to be true, and I believe it with all my heart, and I leave these things, and I'm grateful that you shared your dad. And I say these things in the name of Jesus Christ. Amen.
Thank you all, and I really appreciate those things that have been said today. It's kind of a great honor for me to come up here to kind of close the meeting. Wow. You know, joys happen. It's said in our religion that joys comes through your posterity, and wow, look what Charles has here. This is amazing. This is really amazing. And for all of you, whether it was your husband, your father, your grandfather, great-grandfather, or great-grandfather, or brother or sister, uncle, you should really be proud of this man. What a great individual. I don't want to take a super long time here, but I was asked to say a few things about Charles. And I'm just going to start by, at the beginning you see me spit out, I looked at Myra and I had to spit out my gum because Charles and Myra would stay at home and watch sacrament meeting on the TV, and for whatever reason, I don't know what it is, I chew gum a lot. And so Charles, he tells Myra one day, he's like, "Go get us some gum." And I don't know why, but they wanted to chew some gum, and Myra told me, he's like, "Well, we had to quit that because it got caught in our teeth and messed up our teeth." So, but Charles was always just such a great friend. I want to tell you a little bit about how we met, Charles, Angie, and I. We moved into the neighborhood about 10 years ago, and right shortly before we moved in, I brought some horses down to our place. I had a couple of mares with babies, and Angie and I was taking them, and we were putting them in the front pasture. And I got one mare out, and the baby was falling. It wouldn't go with me into the pasture, so it was running around, kind of being knucklehead. And so I finally get it in, and as I'm walking back to the trailer, I see this guy driving up the road in this red tractor and a cowboy hat. That's pretty good neighbors, I guess. And Jack Savage had told me the guy across the street was a great guy, and I said, well, that's neat. Well, I went into the trailer to get the other mare and get her out of the trailer, and this tractor comes running around the back of my place and stops it. I'm just going like a bat, going like crazy. And once a cowboy, always a cowboy. Stops and he said, "You can't put those horses in there." For those of you that know Charles, that's just about the way he talked to him. "You can't do that." And I'm like, I was raised on a quarter horse farm, but guy kind of reminds me of my dad a little bit, so I'm gonna go for a minute here. And I'm like, "Well, how's that?" He said, "Well, that grass is too high. You can't put those horses in there." So he took his tractor in there and mowed my pasture down. I'm like, "Well, I guess I'll feed hay now because he's mowed all the hay, all the grass away." So, but that was Charles, man. He just was just there all the time, and so I kind of reserved judgment for a little while, and then it wasn't too much longer. He's over there banging on the door every morning and trying to get Angie squash and cucumbers, and like he did to everybody else, and just really reminded me a lot of my dad. Just kind of that tough guy, that tough cowboy guy. And so, I thought, what, I'm going to be okay with Charles. He's going to be a great friend because he's a cowboy. I'm going to be okay with him. So I want to just talk briefly about what I think some of the four most important things that make a person a cowboy. And Charles had all these. First is cowboys know how to draw a hard line. They know how to draw a hard line. They love their country, and this goes for cowgirls too. They love their country, they love their family, and they love God. And some people say cowboys love God, and half of them don't even go to church. Well, let me tell you, when you're out there calving or doing the things that cowboys do, lambing, farming, you're not praying to rocks and trees. You're praying to God, and those things were Charles. And I just want to talk a little bit about some of those things. Charles could draw a hard line. Now, some people might say that what that means is that you're stubborn or bullheaded, maybe set in your ways. For me, that wasn't Charles. I know maybe sometimes he might have been referred to as maybe a little stubborn or bullheaded, but I think the more appropriate words for Charles was he was confident. He was willing to stand for something. He was willing to make things work. This dang hay fever is just bad this year. And he was willing to move on. That's what drawing a hard line is. I want to tell you, I told you a little bit about the red tractor. So one day he's up there and he's always telling me, this red tractor is twice as good as any of these new tractors. It's twice as good as the ones that have more horsepower. And I'm like, okay, Charles and Dad are kind of like the same person. We'll kind of go with it. Well, let me tell you what I found out about that tractor is it was better than the new ones, and it was better than the ones that had more horsepower. And the reason is because Charles was willing to draw a hard line. He got that tractor out of the barn twice as much or 3 times as much as most other tractors in West Mountain. And so it could do more because he made it do more. He was willing to go to work and do more. Charles, he was willing to draw that hard line. Charles loved his country. I like to go over and talk to Charles a lot. I spent a lot of time just visiting with Charles, and I liked hearing his stories about being in the military, but it wasn't very often that he would talk about the country where he wouldn't get choked up. He respected the flag, he respected what it stood for. And he couldn't understand that people couldn't feel the way he felt about this country. A little while ago, one of Charles's sons, Jerry Charles asked him, hey, we need some more flags, and when you're doing that, will you please go over and replace David's flag? My flag was getting a little tattered, and so, just out of the goodness of his heart, Jerry came over and replaced the flag. He was a true patriot. He loved this country. Third thing about a cowboy is they love their families. I'll tell you what, I won't go into a lot of detail here, but I've heard stories from Alaska to New Zealand. I've heard stories about, and I'm going to go through a few things, and maybe you can relate to these. I've heard stories about horse auctions, electricians, foundries, graveyards, firemen, morticians, gardens, sawmills, irrigation, bookkeepers, horse rides, and I'm so glad that Dave talked about the horse ride that he referred to. And I hope somebody got a picture of this guy on the top of the mountain with a bunch of green bottles on a pack horse. It's got to be one of the best pictures. Hopefully you guys got a picture of that. He loved the horse rides. Truck driving, moving dirt, building homes, foundries, water skiing, buying hay, fishing, drones videoing water skiers, camping, airplane rides to faraway places, Thanksgiving, foundries, dairy farms, sports, rubbing foreheads with other men in other countries. I don't know how many times I've heard that story. Christmas, hunting, foundries, having over 100 people in his home, businesses, businessmen, businesswomen, eating different food in strange places, digging ditches, archery. That's a little thing about the archery. I was talking to a good friend of mine that knew Charles, and he's like, well, how are Charlie's Angels? I'm like, what? Charlie's Angels? I kind of give him a bewildered look, like, what are you talking about? He's like, Charlie's daughters. And I'm like, he didn't say Charlie, he said Charles's daughters. I'm like, oh, okay. He's like, why do you call them Charlie's Angels? He's like, well, they're really pretty, and they can kick your... And he's a cowboy too, so I won't finish that. But he said, I'm smart enough to kind of stay away from him because that Charles Shepherd was really good with bow and arrow. So, heard stories about logging camps. And did I mention foundries? I heard a ton of stories about foundries. What did all those stories have in common? I'll tell you what they had in common. They all included some member of his family, or many members of his family. And there's just too many to mention, and there's too many of you to mention. So I mentioned that we're in those stories, so I don't want to leave anybody out. But I'm telling you, I have heard literally hundreds of stories from Charles, and enjoyed every one of them. And one of you, or many of you, were in every one of those stories. Last thing cowboy is to me is he loves God. How do I know Charles loved God? Well, you know what? He told me. Isn't that ironic? He just come out and told me. Give you a little example. About a week ago, I was over there talking with him and Myra, and he said, Bishop, man, I can't hardly get around that. We've been friends for a while, and I just so you can call me David or whatever. But he said, Bishop, because he respected that position in the church. He said, Bishop, I don't think we're going to make it into tithing settlement. I'm like, well, that's fine, Charles. We'll just do it right here. I said, are you full tithe payer? Are you and Myra full tithe payer? Yes, we are. He loved God. How do I know he loved God? Charles respected the opportunities and privileges given to him, like this country. How do I know he loved God? Because he loved his family. It was the most important thing to him on this earth, was his family. And that's been said many times here today. He was a great man, and he knew what was important to him. I was reading a talk by President Russell Ballard, and I'll just kind of paraphrase through some of this. President Ballard was over in the Middle East, and he was on the shores, northwest shores of the Sea of Galilee, which we all know Jesus spent a lot of time in that area. And he's referring, and I'll read and summarize some of this. He's referring to Jesus Christ after the resurrection. Jesus Christ, after Jesus' resurrection, Peter and other disciples fished all night without success. Remember the word success. In the morning, they saw a man standing on the shore, and the man told them to cast their nets on the other side of the boat. To their astonishment, the nets filled miraculously. So think about this for a minute. Here's some disciples of Christ that have been spending a lot of time with this guy for a couple of years. He's a leader, he's a priesthood leader, they're a prophet, good friend, and all of a sudden he's gone. What do? They do probably what a lot of us do. They kind of went back to their ways of life. And these guys were fishermen. They were good